What you're reading is a slow-motion annihilation of one of the most fascinating minds in literary history. So, you know, it's dark. Better than food, man. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. I'm your host, Clifford Lee Sargent. Great to see you as always. Hope you're doing well. No coffee for me today, man. I'm already flying. All right, today is A Sinister Assassin by Antonin Artaud. Oh, it's a little hot there. Tough to kind of see. Let's take the lighting down there for a second, just so you can see this really cool cover. It's not subtle. A Sinister Assassin by Antonin Artaud. Antonin Artaud's last writings, September 1947 to March 1948. Published this year in 2022. Translated and edited by the British author Stephen Barber, with some nice black and white kind of bird's eye photographs from Karolina Urbaniak. That's Artaud's grave. This is the latest publication from the dark as the bile in your gut independent publisher Infinity Land Press, based out of London. Full disclaimer, this was sent to me for free by Infinity Land Press, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. So I guess I'm partially sponsored by them in that they sent me this book for free. I don't even know if that counts, but I just say all these things to cover my bases legally, so yeah. They also sent me this awesome bookmark with Artaud's death mask on it. It's really cool, with this great quote from him on the back. Beyond the rare individuals that I've chosen, because I myself made them, I am the universal enemy of all men. Antonin Artaud, 1948. And that's a quote from the book. That's so cool, huh? This is a beautifully designed collection of the very last, and I mean that literally, like the very, very last writings of the French artist Antonin Artaud. Like including his last notebook in which he was writing hours before he died. And I use the term artist as a catch-all because Artaud was many things. He wore a lot of hats. He was an actor, a writer, a poet, a theater director, kind of a shaman, and in the end, something of a kind of, quite literally, madman slash warlock, a seer trafficking with the abyss. I don't know what description does justification to the life of Antonin Artaud. I'm at a loss for words. The man's story is kind of scarcely believable. The fact that he survived as long as he did actually is kind of a testament to his defiance, right? I've never read anyone so incoherent and simultaneously brilliant, save for maybe Rimbaud. But Artaud has this kind of stark, corporeal vulgarity that is more like Jean Genet or Pierre Gouilletat, author of Eden, 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 who tragically passed away in 2020 and who this book, as a matter of fact, is dedicated to. I still have not reviewed Eden, Eden, Eden. It's on the shelf. That's a doozy. That one is, well, we'll talk about that one day. More extreme than Artaud, as a matter of fact. Anyways, one thing you can always expect from Infinity Land Press is a beautiful graphic design. The cover here is like a high-quality photograph of a distressed Christ statue with a bunch of nails in it. Which, of course, while being blasphemic and provocative, as Artaud certainly was, like violently so, could just as well be a reference to the martyrdom of Artaud at the end of his life. Because a martyr he seemed to be, according to the people who knew him. This book was translated and edited by Stephen Barber, a British author and professor who wrote a biography of Artaud called Blows and Bombs. Seems like an Artaud expert. He was living in Paris in the late 80s and reading Artaud's manuscripts at the Bibliothèque Nationale and meeting with his surviving friends. As he put it in this interview with Karolina Urbaniak of Infinity Land Press that I've linked to below, during the pandemic he had the time to concentrate on translating this final work of Artaud, which had never been translated before, even in French. And it seemed like an appropriate time given that there was such a social focus on apocalypse and contamination, some themes that Artaud was working with. But real quick, today's video is sponsored by the Ridge Wallet. Are you tired of carrying a wrinkled piece of dead cattle skin warping your spine out of alignment? I was too. These things are awesome. They are light, sleek, industrial, beautiful little pieces of minimalist modular design. Very easy to use, holds up to 12 cards, plus room for cash on the back. This one has a cash clip. It's pretty awesome. They also come with a strap. You can change them out also if you like. This is the Damascus model, which I think is fantastic. It's like a metallic zebra pattern. I love it. Though of course, if you prefer something else, they have over 30 colors and styles to choose from. These are meant to go into your front pocket or your side pocket, not your back pocket. Please do not sit on these. It's not that they'll break, it just won't feel good at all. The durable material means that each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. You can buy this one wallet and carry it for life. In fact, the Rich team is so confident you'll like it, they'll let you test drive it for 45 days. You can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. And if that wasn't enough to convince you yet, think of all the money you're gonna save on chiropractor bills. So get 10% off your order today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/betterthanfood and using the discount code betterthanfood. The link is below. Thanks a bunch. The story of Antonin Artaud must be one of the most mysterious and tragic in all of art and literature. One of the most fascinating as well, one of the most extreme. Right up there with Arthur Rimbaud, who Artaud was influenced by. In his younger years, he was an exceptionally handsome artist. Like, he had movie star good looks and employed them. You can just Google search Artaud young. And he was an actor for many years. And I've linked to a scene wherein he plays a priest. Ironic, he was a vehement atheist, so it's kind of ironic. But I've linked to this scene in Carl Dreyer's film Joan of Arc, where Artaud plays a priest, and he's talking to Joan as right before she's about to be burned at the stake. I think Artaud's most well-known work is The Theater and Its Double, an essay collection written in the 30s, which contains the essay and manifesto for The Theater of Cruelty. This was the work people know him for. I still haven't read it, but I need to. I know, I'm super late to the game. He was addicted to opiates from a very young age, I think in his early 20s. And that lasted for the rest of his life. And yeah. He made this trip to Ireland, like this pilgrimage to Ireland, and Barber was talking about this in that talk, in that interview that I've linked to below. And he was saying that Artaud believed that the apocalypse was imminent. And in a way, he was actually kind of right, because then World War II happened. But Artaud went to Ireland and went to this certain location convinced that the apocalypse was going to happen. Already his mental state seemed to have been falling apart. When it didn't happen, it sounds like he was disappointed and came back to France. And somewhere in that trip, something had gone wrong, it seems. I think it sounds like he had a mental breakdown between the beginning and end of that trip. And when he came back to France, he was placed in an asylum and would spend almost the entirety of the rest of his life in various asylums, including during the occupation of Paris, which was harrowing, to say the least. In one asylum during the German occupation, I think he'd been beaten, starved, and just really suffered. This guy really went through some shit. In his final asylum, in a place called Rodez, it sounded like a horrible place, he was subjected to bouts of electroshock therapy, which was seen as innovative at the time. But for him, it sounded like, for Artaud, it was extremely painful, and it seemed to have destroyed a lot of his memory. I think in Rodez, he was subjected to 50 bouts of electroshock therapy. It was really brutal. So eventually his friends kind of rallied and got him out and back to Paris, or near Paris. But he was sort of a shell of who he was. He looked rather terrifying, like a witch, as one person who knew him put it in the documentary I've linked to below. Great documentary. As though he had traveled to the very depths of madness, and part of him had returned, but only part. Unrecognizable, basically. Disturbed, but still somehow furiously determined on producing his work. It's interesting. In his last years, he gave this radio broadcast, like this, I guess I've seen it described as a radio play, but it's more of like an occult ritual or something. It's the definition of madness. It was this radio broadcast called To Have Done with the Judgment of God, which was censored. It was banned and then locked away, shelved, until years later, I believe. It surfaced a decade or two later, I think, and now you can listen to the whole thing. I've linked to it below. It sounds like about what you'd expect. So the last place of his residence was overgrown and unkempt, described as ghostly and a kind of ruin by a fellow in that documentary below. Not a good neighborhood, not a desirable place to be. But, he was there, he was out of the asylum. He was getting a lot of drugs, basically. And, but yeah, it was dark. This book is very short. You could read it in an afternoon. It has a beautiful layout with bird's eye photographs, black and white photographs, of Artaud's internment locations, as well as the area of and around his last residence. And these are the train tracks nearby, and this is the site of Artaud's pavilion. And one thing I really love about this publisher is that they always include these, when they translate these documents that are pretty old, they always include these high-quality photographs of the original document. For example, this is the picture of Artaud's notebook page that has been stabbed. As you can see, there's actually, you can actually see the stabs right there. And this is entitled 50 Drawings to Assassinate Magic, which was never actually finished, but it was this project he started, this writing project he started. And he was doing a lot of drawings as well. The first part of the book is actually a posthumously published collection of Artaud's writing in a small poetry publication, funded by the money that Artaud's friends found around his place and in his pockets after his death, which is kind of touching. They pooled it all together and made this. He had like a group of people, these personalities who were fighting for him, including the group that, you know, that wanted to get him out of the asylum, some very famous French figures. I think Gide was one of them, and another one, I forget. Next are a couple of texts he was working on near the end of his life. One of them, like I said, is called 50 Drawings to Assassinate Magic, and the other is called The New Tutaguri, which I believe is about his trip that he made to Mexico, which he did with the intent of consuming peyote. There's also some interviews in the book, I think a couple of interviews, and the last section contains the last pages of his notebook, notebook number 406. He had all these like children's notebooks that he carried around with him, and he just wrote furiously in them, it sounds like, and he just, yeah. Artaud's hundreds of pierced, stained, and assailed notebooks from the years 1945 to 48 from Rodez and then Ivry-sur-Seine are archived together in drawers on one side of the Bibliothèque Nationale de France's manuscript reading room. I might have been to that room, I'm not sure if it's the same one, but when I was in Paris and I got to view it was when I was trying to adapt Georges Bataille's Story of the Eye, and I got to see the first edition, which was one of the coolest experiences of my whole life. But anyways, there is some kind of exceptional ritual at stake whenever the archivists are asked to bring out the last notebook of all from the drawer's extreme end, as though its green cover held or embodied some kind of forensic evidence from which the residues of Artaud's death, an act of diabolical, magical, or social assassination, or an amalgam of all three, for him, can be investigated and exposed. And they actually had the high quality photos from his notebook, as you can see here. It's pretty cool. So yeah, that last section contains the last pages from his notebook. And it ends with a line where he writes, etc., etc. And they've made me plummet into death there, where I'm ceaselessly eating cock, the anus too, and shit, for all of my meals, all those of the cross. Pollardization. I have no idea what that means, but it says, note, this word is inscribed vertically at the page's left margin. So the same figure returns every morning, he is an other, in order to accomplish his revolting, criminal, and murderous sinister mission, which is to maintain the state of bewitchment cast upon me, and to continue to make of me this eternally bewitched man, etc., etc. And those were the last words he wrote before he died. Which is eerie, no? This persecution complex where he thinks that society has sent this assassin, and he starts writing about it, writing these incantations to defend himself against this assassin sent from society or whoever who's trying to either bewitch or kill him, and then he dies. But yeah, hence the title, A Sinister Assassin. It's a disturbing book, unsettling. There's like a description of an anatomical reconstruction where Artaud's calling organs parasites, and he's reconstructing the body without them. And if that sounds familiar, yeah, that inspired Deleuze and Guattari's concept of the body without organs in their work Anti-Oedipus, Capitalism and Schizophrenia. I haven't read that book yet, and I don't understand the body without organs concept. I think I looked it up several times, but I still don't understand it. So if anybody knows what that means, maybe someone can explain it to me in the comments below. Thank you. One day I will review that book, but it is long, so. But the writing is beyond odd. It's like incantations and like percussive, ritualistic explosions of vocal noises. It's both violently powerful and tragic, and it kind of oscillates between these two extremes. His style is so discombobulated when he begins writing down what are essentially incantations, rituals, like mumbo-jumbo and gobbledygook, that it's really in one way kind of depressing, because what you're reading is the disintegration of this raving poet's mind. So it's kind of a morbid curiosity in that respect, right? But simultaneously, it is in fact a powerful expression from Artaud himself, who would certainly have wanted to drench us in this poisonous fluid of his writing as much as possible. You get that feeling. Like, he's fine with it being out there. He's really happy that everybody's reading this. He's quite intentional, right? He wants to get all of this out, unleashing some vicious, scathing, poisonous writing. I don't know how else to describe it. You gotta read it. I mean, it's just the way he writes. It's so idiosyncratic. It's so unto himself. There's nobody like Artaud. As if every line was written with him foaming at the mouth, lashing out, right? You can almost see the spittle flying off the pages. Stark raving mad, but punctuated with these moments of clarity, as if it was like, you know, it would come in like waves, almost. Yeah, let's try it out here. All of us are enveloped by a secondary humanity, a humanity that is malevolent and sinister, which draws its roots from within the bodies of everyday human beings, who at certain moments realize they have become vampires, and brutally start to act as vampires. Those people are among the ones who didn't kill the beast in themselves as it was being born. They are the ones who refused to detach themselves from the beast because they were too attached to it. That beast is a bottomless eroticism, arising from the grim day of an eroticism of the world's abysses that you can discover just by shutting your eyes. It's so powerful because for as crazy as Artaud got, he really did seem to have one foot in the real world, the one wherein he could still produce work. He couldn't sustain himself in a normal way per se, but he wasn't totally gone. He operated in this twilight between madness and sanity, which is so, that's impossible to manufacture, right? So he's really this kind of, he's totally unto himself. There's just nobody who wrote like him, nobody who was able to access those kinds of places. You couldn't fake being Artaud. Only Artaud writes like Artaud. He's totally distinct and unto himself. And, also for that reason, it's also very tragic, very alone. Truly, truly alone. So yeah, it's amazing and it's kind of something to behold, but it's also very sad, right? The whole thing is very, very sad. It's impressive to read him, and it's incredible to kind of behold, but this existence was so chaotic for him, so completely dissolute and impossible to sustain, especially when you bring into account his opiate addiction. It was really just a matter of time before he succumbed to one of his, what sounded like various illnesses. What you're reading is a slow motion annihilation of one of the most fascinating minds in literary history. So, it's dark. It's kind of a fascinating but horrifying spectacle, right? These writings, which are at once poems, incantations, rituals, assaults against the physical body, like vocal assaults against the physical body, blasphemous insults, and sort of possessed, demented, poetic methods of posing philosophical questions. It's like noise music or black metal before there were such things, right? He was really trying to reach down into the depths of his hateful gut and expel it. They're bass, rhythmic, primitive, raw, glossolalia, speaking in tongues, violent noises representing outbursts, captured in the form of text. Not meant to be read, but rather spoken aloud, according to one of the people who knew him in the documentary below. Maybe screamed. It's kind of a fascinating but horrifying spectacle. It's as if Artaud was in a state of some kind of agonized possession near the end of his life. Perpetually afflicted. He gives the impression of having been in constant pain, living off a constant supply of opiates, and falling to pieces. What is so fascinating to me is the fervor, the urgency with which Artaud pursued his projects. In spite of his worsening condition, it only seemed to heighten Artaud's drive to express what he needed to, what he's attempting. He was defiantly raging against death, which it seemed he knew he was near. You don't get the feeling that he ever slowed down as he neared death, but in fact, the contrary. You get the impression that everything suddenly became very, very urgent and he had to do it right away. As he edged closer and closer to death, which he definitely felt, his urgency increased. His need to produce these things was serious. And there's a couple interviews contained in the book, and I think he actually mentions that he's going to die, I think he speculated that he would die in March, and he did. Artaud died from an overdose of chloral hydrate. Apparently, he died in the middle of getting dressed as he was still holding his shoe. It's not known whether or not he knew he'd taken too much, but then in keeping with his personality, Artaud seemed to insist on the maximum dose possible whenever he took anything. He seemed to have developed this persecution complex, right? Including this kind of loathing towards God, as he felt personally attacked by God, it seemed. For good reason, too. You might think, well, that's kind of crazy, but then there's a line in this book about his testicles being black, like Artaud's testicles having turned black when he's talking to his doctor. And you begin to wonder, he was probably in I think he had colorectal cancer that he died from, but I think there were a lot of things. So life back then was just excruciating, man. A lot of things suck about being alive today, but thank God for modern medicine, at least. Even if health insurance is a bitch, whatever. Thank God for modern medicine. Artaud's life seems to have been the definition of suffering. He suffered all kinds of physically and mentally painful illnesses. How much of it can be attributed to his own actions, I'm really not sure. Perhaps the temptation to write Artaud off as merely an eccentric is too overpowering, as when confronted with this work of his, it's so abrasive and off the wall that one's defenses are immediately raised, right? But if one were to accept that indeed he was ill, but that perhaps he was onto something much larger than what it appears at first glance. Then the work begins to take on an even more disturbing quality. I said in my review of Artaud's book Heliogabalus, linked below, that mental illness often improves art. And nowhere, to the best of my knowledge, is there a finer example of this than in the work of Antonin Artaud. Better than food. So you should read it. Well, yeah, anyone who enjoys Artaud or Rimbaud or Bataille or Guyotat or Michael Girard or I'm starting to sing a song here, that's kind of weird, or transgressive literature in general, especially the French stuff. For those of you who are new to Artaud, I would not start here. Actually, I would check out Heliogabalus, which was also published by Infinity Land Press. Link below to the review. I think I read that that was his most accessible one. Or check out the collection The Theater and Its Double, which, again, he's perhaps most famous for. So what did I dislike? Just that it was so short, really. That, and you need a lot, I think it was just the order I read it in, because you really need a lot of context to get this one. It's definitely fascinating as a book, but it's more of kind of this, more than like a piece of literary work, it's more of like a document, like a found document, right? Because it is. I mean, it's literally found documents from Artaud's life when he was very close to death. And you need a lot of context to place this, right? And I think you have to have read a significant amount of Artaud to understand it, to get the full picture. So were I to do it again, I would pick up some other books by Artaud, and then I would read this one last, which seems appropriate since it was the very, very last thing he wrote. So, all right, coffee time. For those of you who are new, I take all the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show. I place their names in this mason jar. And for every review I do, I pull out a name. And whoever's name I pull out is sent a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee roasted by yours truly. And the coffee is delicious. If you would like to get in on that and help support the show, you can click on the link below or go to patreon.com/books-are-better-than-food and donate $5 or more per video, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you. For donating $1 or more per video, you get access to all the Patron-only reviews, plus all the reviews ad-free, and some more cool stuff listed below. International shipping is now included. So, no matter where you are in the world, if you support the show and you win, you shall be sent the package. No questions asked, save for your mailing address, of course. Thank you very much to all the patrons, and best of luck. Okay, here we go. Mr. Pink 1776. Very good year. Thank you very much, Mr. Pink 1776. You're going to receive Antonin Artaud's A Sinister Assassin, plus a bag of coffee roasted by yours truly, and I hope you love both. Thank you so much. Well, that's all I've got for you today. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this. Really helps out the show. I sincerely appreciate it. And always remember, die reading. And thank you very much to Karolina and Martin over at Infinity Land Press. Check out the books on their site, link below. I think they just released their own edition of Lautremont's Maldoror. So yeah, very cool. Check it out. All right, take care of yourselves. Have a great night. Talk to you soon. Ciao.